Hey everybody, thanks for clicking on the video. If you don't know what the series is, like what this is a series of highlights from, every Monday and Wednesday I watch through a new episode of Critical Role. Now, I pause a lot. It's not just like I'm sitting there staring at the show. Normally a 3-hour episode takes me anywhere from 6 to 7 hours to get through. So this highlight reel will be mostly highlights of the actual stream. If you want to see highlights of Critical Role, I'm sure there are a million compilations out there. But this one will be a highlight of the stream, and I hope that you enjoy because I love making them. We've got a great community of people that stop by and participate in the stream. We build new things. We talk about DMing, tactics, and strategies, and best practices. It's really an amazing time. And I want to say an extra special thank you to Hans and John. They provided a ton of time codes for this highlight reel of their favorite moments and moments that it seemed like other people liked as well. So huge thank you to them. They did that over in my Discord. Shameless plug. It's great. And so if you want to join, that'll be down in the description. Thanks again to them. And let's get into the highlight reel.
That's on me. Ashley Johnson unfortunately cannot join us. She's our gnome cleric, Pike.
Oh my god, there's another person missing? There's 8 people? Fuck me.
She'll be here next. Our city is a 3-tiered cylindrical city that is built into the ground of the mountain itself.
I'm already starting. I've always been curious as to what people mean by the Matt Mercer effect. What does Matt do so differently from most DMs? Like, what is the effect? And I've also heard people describe Matt's DMing style like you're listening to an audiobook. And boy, do I get it already. Yeah, that's pretty descriptive. I shouldn't say hyper descriptive. I've actually been with a DM who is even more descriptive. But that is, I mean, that's really dope. If you want to give that much description, you want to paint a picture of your world, but it's definitely not necessary.
Welcome to Craghammer. Previous encounter in the bar. In the center of the room, there looks to be a not currently in use, specifically built brawling circle. It's about maybe about 30 feet by 20 feet. It's more of an oval, and it's not in use currently.
An octagon?
Essentially.
Love that. Give your players what they want. Give the players what they want. Grog likes to brawl. Fucking give him a brawling circle. I love it. This is what I was talking about, describing the immediate surroundings. I had a feeling that he was going to get more into it as the session went on, and as he probably had more prepared. I will say something that I always talk about when new DMs ask me how to get better at describing the scene. It is think specifically about your senses, and most often the thing that will make your descriptions sound descriptive is your sense of smell and hearing. Sight is important because sight, what they see gives them options and actions. It's essentially drawing a map for them. But if you include senses of smell and senses of hearing, that is what really brings people into the scene. You can describe in fine detail the creneling on the walls, the material that things are made out of, every last knick-knack and trinket. It will all feel like you're drawing a map. The moment you talk about what it smells like, what sounds they hear, low murmuring or raucous laughter, someone singing a song, like all of these things actually build the vibes, and they build the actual description of the scene rather than just drawing a map for your players. So, love that he's talking about like what they smell. They smell stale beer, wood. I don't think he's gotten to hearing, but even just including one or the other, it makes it a description rather than don't know the other word that I would use, but rather than just drawing them a map.
Grog.
All right. Both tables next to the table they're at are completely filled with dwarves.
All right, I take a sack of gold out of my own pocket and slam down the table.
Sack of gold? Are you crazy?
Gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen, we are traveling from far away. We've just arrived from Iman. We are fascinated to see your underground city, and to celebrate the occasion, I would like to buy every dwarf in here around. Bartender!
The music stops. The conversation stops. All the guys turn to the table.
Love that. Again, great description, great vibes. Turning off the music. All the talking stops. Don't describe what they see. Don't describe, faces turning. Describe what you hear. Describe the vibes.
Well, and they all turn to a single dwarven woman at the back who's behind one of the bars, who has a towel over one arm, and she's kind of frantically looking around. She's staring confused at you, and all eyes are on her, and she goes, "Well, it's about time someone around here had some generosity. Certainly, pay up front drinks around on this half-elfin gentleman.
Let's go!
Make a raise.
I'll need your largest bowl of ale for this one here.
Cash,
please.
No worries, Adra's got your back. Be right back." And she wanders off to the back room, comes back, and starts pouring just stein after stein after stein of ale, like the big barrel set up on top.
Looks good.
You do notice she is definitely the head of this tavern, and all of her barkeeps are male. And they seem to be worked rather ragged.
Interesting thing to call out.
Excuse me, miss,
get her.
you...
Adra, yay!
I'm sorry, what was
Adra.
Adra, you run a fantastic establishment here.
Right, I do.
Thank
Oh,
you
taking
for
notes.
welcoming us and allowing us to buy
Love a
this
note
round.
taker.
We really,
Patrons that come in and drop coin like that are welcome anytime.
well, thank you for your hospitality. Might we inquire about staying here the night? Do you have an inn with this tavern?
She reaches below and pulls out a big tome and starts thumbing through it. Actually, we have openings right now on the second floor.
Several rooms or just one?
Do you need them side by side?
That would be nice.
I could probably muster that. I'll push him into room
Something with
7.
a little bed for me.
Child! One of the dwarf barmaiders comes over. Aye. Get Stepson out of his room, move him to the 3rd floor. He's got to open a block for our new guests. Aye, fine. And the older dwarf kind of stumbles his way up the stairs begrudgingly.
I will also say something that I was just thinking about. You notice that he just slammed a bag of gold down on the table, and Matt did not even mention how much the drinks cost. He just accepted this arbitrary unit of a bag of gold. Now, it depends on the type of campaign you're running, obviously. Everything does. But I think that's great. I think that for things like that where, he's clearly not running a resource management type of game where every single gold will matter and needs to be accounted for, and if they don't manage their gold reserves, they won't be able to buy potions, and then they'll die. I don't know. It's clearly not that. And so for a narrative moment like this, where you're in a campaign where gold and resources are prevalent, don't slow down the pace by being like, okay, that's 30 gold, whatever. And then maybe they realize they don't fucking have it, what have you. Just make a quick note about it as the DM, just on your little scratch pad of this player minus some amount of gold. Even minus a bag of gold. And then you can talk with that player after session where you're out of the flow a little bit, and you can discuss what a good price would be. It's not very gritty. It's very narrative driven, which clearly they said at the beginning, this is going to be a little bit more of a loosey-goosey type of game, and I think that's just fine. It's different strokes for different folks. But I love that he did not break up the narrative flow by haggling price. Unless the haggling is part of the narrative. Then that'd be something. But for this, where it's not, just being like, great, bag of gold, done. And then you discuss it afterward.
Right, so if I can get a room for each of you, we're looking at 8 rooms separately. That will run you per evening about
split the party.
I'm going to House Thunderbrand if anybody wants to
What
come.
did you do? I can't understand you with that popcorn in your mouth.
Sorry,
I would like
I'm going to House Thunderbrand before turning in for the evening.
Oh.
I've had a nice little short rest, and I would like to ask them a few questions.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
Cool. You?
No,
Is there any recon that's going to happen
I
tonight?
think you and I are going to go to Gray's Fine.
We'll check out the house.
Do you need any help?
Sure, you can come with.
Dude, this is crazy. I am legitimately curious, and I don't know what I expect out of this, because splitting the party, one of the reasons that it is so infamous and that it's such a meme is that splitting the party means that you are having to do double duty as the DM in terms of description, in terms of describing the scene. You're having to do normally twice as much NPC work, and it means that the same amount of players doing the same amount of things takes up not normally twice as much time, but, you know, a time and a half, a time 0.75, you know? Like, that's one of the reasons that splitting the party is so infamous, is because it just murders the pace of the game. And I am going to be fascinated to see how he deals with this with 7 people, splitting the party with 7 people. Unless all the other players just say, yeah, fuck it, we're all going to Thunderbrand.
They all kind of surround you on all sides. You have a dwarf at each corner. Like,
You have attacked one of the great dwarven families of Craghammer. Name yourself and your business before you're under arrest.
Don't speak to me in that manner. I am Tiberius Stormwind.
All right, love that. I'm learning a lot about Tiberius right now, and yeah, I'm loving it. That's really funny, and I don't know if that was purposeful. I feel like it might have been, knowing what I know about Matt Mercer. State your name and your business. Now, business obviously is often a euphemism and is often, is often used in place of, like, what are you doing here? That's your business here. But in the established lore so far of Craghammer, that is this very mercantile situation where, like, the rich wield disproportionate power to the rest of the populace, it seems like. Stating your name and your business is a very light bit of colloquial work that can go to solidify that feeling and that vibe of Craghammer as a whole in one sentence. That this military force is more concerned about what sort of business you have here rather than your intentions, like any other way they could have said it. Again, maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe I'm giving Matt too much credit. But to me, that speaks of a very purposeful building of a vibe within the Craghammer setting.
But if you so much as spit in the direction of any other dwarf in this city, we're going to bury you so far underneath the dungeon that you won't see the light of day till the day you rot. You hear me, Dragonborn?
I mean, yes, my hearing's perfectly fine.
get on. Puts his hammer back in his side.
Something I complimented Matt for earlier was his description of how things smelled, and he has not described how things smell or sound since. And I think that's a shame. I think that for this dwarf, you can describe the black eyes, the extra carvings, and also that his steps are eerily quiet for how large and menacing he is. Again, describing those sensory details can be huge for planting the vibe and making people really feel the weight of these characters.
They all kind of separate but stare you down as you walk past.
Good day.
I do like Tiberius. I like Tiberius so far.
Yes.
You go ahead and make your way through the alleyways, eventually back towards the building proper. What would you like to do?
Remember, he's our friend.
I'm taking a short
Don't
rest.
kill him.
I'm taking a short
Okay.
rest.
Volgus' drunken, kind of mist-covered state does not seem to notice your approach. He is swinging wildly, though. He has a disadvantage attack on you as you approach. One of his fists just swings past you. That is going to be a 12. I don't think that hits. You just narrowly dodge out of the way. You can feel the fist just woof, past one of your ears as you come back up, clutching the base of your dagger.
Okay, no initiative for combat. I'm down with that. A lot of people are like, you need initiative because combat is unbalanced without it. Look, fucking hot take of the day, combat's kind of boring. Like, combat is fun and interesting, but also boring. It can be all those things at once, right? And for something like this that is so narratively driven, like, it doesn't seem like they are, like, the 7 of them, all level 9s, are easily overwhelming this one dude. So when you're thinking about, like, what is the purpose of any given combat, right? When you're thinking about that, this combat is not a test of if the party can take down this fighter or this monk, whatever he is. That's not the test. It's more of a narrative, fun puzzle for them to discover lore and or make enemies or friends, right? And so in that context, since that is the purpose of this combat, it makes sense not to need to roll initiative. Let people do things when they want to do. Let them get a little bit weird and wacky. All good. Alternatively, if there's a combat where the entire purpose is to see if they survive or to see exactly how they puzzle out this combat, you need initiative. You need to make sure that everyone is going in a specific order because that preserves the integrity of the puzzle, and it allows them to be more strategic about their solving of the puzzle. And it also gives them a very clear idea of the dangers, of the time pressures that they're under. That's the good part of initiative. But for this one, he's clearly just like, he's rolling attack rolls, people are going whenever they want, and that's okay. Because this is not a puzzle, this is narrative.
Pull back the dagger, his hand reaches up and grabs your wrist. His head slowly turns towards you, and he goes,
Again, this is great. This is narrative because he, what's his face? It's either Vex or Vax. I don't know which one of them is the male. But he did not get a saving throw because it doesn't matter. This isn't true combat. This is extended narration, extended story. Only with the slight guise of the dice giving some randomness to the choices. So you don't need to give him a saving throw to, save against the grapple. It's much more fun to just show off the power of this force that they're fighting.
The apparent barrel that Grog's holding. They look wary of Grog. Once they make note of the barrel, they all kind of, oh, right, there's this shit. I've not seen you actually drink it. Well, there's been long-standing rumors that this even existed.
It exists.
And it's for Nostrock.
This live stream is live, Angus. Me commenting on this. This is Critical Role Episode 1, Campaign 1. This is from nearly 7 years ago. Actually, no, nearly 8 years ago. Well over 7 years ago. We are starting from the beginning. Hell yeah. I've never seen it. I've been DMing and playing for nearly a decade, about 10 years. And I have never watched a single episode, so we're starting from the very beginning, baby.
This is a Borges original.
Yes.
Signed by himself, I see, on the burn and blazing wood.
Oh, fuck yeah.
And he heads inside the building. The doors close behind.
I love that. I'm very interested, having played a lot of D&D and watching this, it's very interesting because I've heard so much about Critical Role, and I run into people all the time in real life that tell me I need to watch it, and I've always had it in the back of my head, and especially once Vox Machina came out. I didn't watch it because I was like, I gotta watch the actual play first, so I'm super excited to be watching it.
Behind that,
Oh God.
a number of goblins that are currently held
Oh my God.
over here.
1, 2,
They're
3,
easy.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I will say, this sort of, and this is, I think, a slightly controversial opinion that I think me and Matt share. Hexless or gridless maps are based. If people are worried or concerned about range, they can always ask. But the size of the miniatures just naturally provides a good reference, as long as you draw the map with the size of the miniatures in mind. But if you do, the miniatures themselves can give players a good sense of distance without needing the preciseness of the grid and the limitations therein. Having this nice, fluid, totally gridless system can lead to much smoother combat. People aren't counting out individual squares. It's just, oh, if I moved here, how far can I move? Would I be close enough? Yes, yes. Boom. You're done. Now, it does mean that, people can't quite plan as much during their turn, which is a weakness. But I think that once you run it enough, for reference, I ran my entire first campaign totally gridless. And I think once you run it enough, the players start to get enough of a sense of the scale that they start to almost be able to fill in the blanks on their own. And then as the DM, you just kind of be permissive, right? If they're close enough, fuck it, let them throw the fireball. You're in range. Congratulations. So I'm way down with this, where it's not quite as loose as Theater of the Mind combat, where it can be a struggle for the players to even imagine what's going on, but it's not as rigid as gridded combat, where you are bogged down in the details. I think this is a great middle ground, personally.
3, 4, 5, 6, 27 points of damage.
Double? And then that's double?
I mean, I guess at level 9,
that's
but
double.
still.
All right. So you guys hear this cacophonous, this large blasting sound, and a flash of kind of blue energy and sparks shoot out the back of the weapon. It actually lifts Percy off the ground for a second and he catches himself in the sheer
Fuck
blast.
yeah. I love that I totally relate with this, where Matt's like, he's in it now. He has to get up. He cannot be contained. He cannot be describing the bad news sitting down. That would be ridiculous. He has to get up. He has to emote. He has to move around. I vibe with that energy.
This streaking.
It's like playing croquet at this point.
Grog's your turn.
I would like to rage, and I would like to move to the right of all those stinking goblins.
Right over here?
Yeah, a little more to the right. Yeah, a little more. Yeah, keep going all the way. Yeah. And then I would like to give them the cleanest shave possible.
I'm loving Grog. I'm loving Travis.
It'll hit 2 as well,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, you can multiply the sneak attack
So
damage.
5
Fuck yeah, he
plus-
does.
The double goes to the sneak attack.
It does. The modifiers don't double, but any dice you roll double.
Hell yeah.
Like
15, so 30 plus 5, 35.
35.
Plus poison.
You're a little.
The poison's not going to factor in.
Okay.
You swing
Exactly.
right into the side of its ribcage.
That's what I'm
You hear it
saying.
howl out in pain. As it does, you twist the daggers in a way where both blades are now. Going
Dude, Assassin is the Assassin didn't even come in this circumstance because, it's mostly about that first turn. But Assassin, I personally feel, is kind of a criminally underrated martial. Like, they have a thing that they can do, and they do it so well. And that just kind of takes care of combat for them. Like, if you're an assassin, you know that your job is to get the drop on someone. You are starting combat, and then you're fucking auto-critting. You're getting all that sneak attack damage, and then you're just taking a combatant out of the fight. That is your job as an assassin. It is to get the numbers advantage. And now you're just an extra body that does okay damage, but you have done your role, and you've done it fucking well.
section of its entire abdomen. As you do, the flesh, almost like whale blubber, just slops off the side of it. Organs spill out intestines, and it kind of looks down and tries to pull them back in.
Okay, I'm gathering that this is also part of the Matt Mercer effect, is the really big descriptions of death scenes. That's one of the things that I've heard about, is like, people watch Critical Role and then they feel like they need to describe every death. Which I think that describing deaths is fucking cool. Like, I got nothing against that, but I've been trying to piece together, like, what is the Matt Mercer effect? because you hear it mentioned in so many online circles related to D&D, but I've never seen it firsthand. So I'm really excited to keep piecing it together.
Sitting down.
Let's do it.
The stone cracks. You can see a noticeable crack and an audible.
I'm running right now diagonally
I
towards
cast-
the side of the wall.
Look, I know that from what I understand, Marisha has a bit of a negative reputation within the first season. But so far, she's trying to do fun shit. Like, the Wall of Stone, mechanically, does it do all that much? Not really. But it's fun, and it allows Matt, it gives the DM fodder to do cool shit like he's about to do, of cracking through this big stone wall. Like, that sort of fun shit, even if you're wasting resources, especially since they have short rests being 10 minutes, fucking waste as many resources as you want to just do cool, fun shit, you know?
I still have mine, but I haven't used yet.
I don't think that's how...
Vex and Vax.
I don't think that's how Inspire works. It's a bonus action for one.
I think you're really handsome and nice. You're going to have inspiration dice.
I thought you were gonna have a little.
I know, some beautiful song for us.
Working on it. All right,
Wait,
so
one,
so you
for
got-
all of us, we all get
all
a
each of you has to have a single D8 dice. It's an
Beauty.
inspiration dice that kind of, the bardic inspiration has flown through you that you can use to add
that's
to it.
fine.
I totally agree, Angus. I think when people use resources to do interesting things, you don't necessarily need to give them crazy rewards. But giving them any amount of small reward for creative play is huge. Like, sometimes, I'm not a big, create or destroy water. You can create and destroy the water inside of someone's body. When I'm talking about creative play, it's exactly like what you're talking about, of rewarding something that you can't replicate over and over. So, I think that the classic example of, using create or destroy water to kill someone by destroying all the water in their body, that's something you could repeat over and over and over and over and over. That's not really creative play. This, of blocking off the entrance really quick, that's a great thing to reward, because it's not always going to be viable. It's not always going to work. It's not always going to make sense. And here, it does make sense. Keeping this thing at bay for a few seconds while they set up is great, especially for someone like Vax, the assassin. That's amazing for him. And rewarding that even extra, I think, really goes towards creating a very creative environment, because now people know that they're not just going to waste their shit if they do something maybe a little bit off kilter with it.
4 plus 7.
Don't
is
forget your
11.
inspiration.
Inspiration dice is for to hit.
Oh, okay.
11
So 11 points of damage.
for the first one, plus for the blazing bowstring, I get I can turn any arrow into a flaming arrow, doing additional 10 fire damage. So I'll roll that right now,
There you go.
which is this.
Okay, this is sort of just a tough situation about coming into this at level 9. I think that for table play, it's okay if the pace is sometimes pretty slow. That's totally fine. Or if people are kind of refamiliarizing themselves with abilities. But right now, they are just whipping out abilities that none of us as an audience have ever seen, because all of this was in the Pathfinder game before this. I think that maybe it would have been better for them to just restart at level 1 or level 3 or whatever, when they had less things and we as an audience could learn all of their abilities with them. I understand why they transferred it over. It totally makes sense. But it is she has this thing and then she has that thing. And as an audience, we're not used to all of these things, especially since a lot of them are Pathfinder ports, like this blazing bowstring. So it's a little hard to keep track of, and makes D&D combat, which is already a little weird to watch as an audience, at least I think so far. And it makes it just that much more of a barrier. Like, makes it that much more confusing.
7. It's going to be a 19 to hit. With a hit you as well.
Yeah.
And natural 20 again.
Wow!
So 2 critical hits and a hit on you.
What is this bullshit?
Tiberius.
Woof.
That's a 22 to hit. And a 13 to hit.
One does,
Look,
one
if you got, dude, I cannot even imagine how strong this thing is because you have 7 level 9s. You have nearly double the party, which does not double the CR that they can take on, right? So a party of 4 CR9s, or sorry, not CR9s, a party of 4 level 9s can take on a level, or a CR9 creature. More or less. The party should win because they have the better action economy. So, doubling that action economy, having 8 level 9s, I don't know how that math works out. Like, because the table in the DMG definitely does not do the math that tall, with that many participants on your side. So, he kind of would have just had to guess at how strong to make this thing. And 5 attacks, that's pretty strong. That's fair. They have 7 attacks, at least. So this thing is going to be beefy.
Okay.
First episode, my main takeaway is, oh my god, there's 7 players. It's too many. It's too many. Most of my problems with, like, most of all of my problems were literally just because it's like, oh wait, there's 7 of them. Any of my problems with the players, any of my problems with Matt's DMing, all stemmed from the fact that there's freaking 7 of them. Now, I will say, in all fairness, I didn't have many problems. It was really fun. It was honestly, like, admittedly better than I was expecting. There was a lot of things that I was expecting in terms of, like, the Matt Mercer effect, a lot of Marisha May hate, and like Matt being like this overly descriptive, like, book narrator of a DM. He was fine. Like, it was like most of the problematic nature was that he was having to describe like 4 separate locations simultaneously because the party split into 3 groups. And also Marisha was fine. Like, the Marisha hate is crazy. I'm sure that, there will be a lot of other, I have a lot more sessions to go. That was just the primer. But she seemed great. Druid is a confusing class. I have DM'd first timers that were significantly worse than her. So yeah, all in all of the issues were just, oh my god, there's 7 of them. Hopefully that gets a little bit better, or it might just not, and I might get used to it. We'll see. So that's my summary of episode 1. My prediction for episode 2, it's pretty clear. We're going into a dungeon dive of some manner, which will be very interesting to see how Matt DMs. What up, Undead King? With first-time druids, you best not be talking about me. No, Paige, not talking about you. Just first-time casters in general. Yeah. No, but we're about to go into our first dungeon dive, which is going to be sick. I'm very excited. I think that the way that DMs handle dungeons is a very stylistic thing. There's a lot of different ways to go about doing it, and it'll be very interesting to see how Matt handles it. My big prediction for this episode is that we will get to the end of the dungeon. We will see the dungeon boss, and I think that the dungeon boss will be the halfling that the party is here to rescue or to bring home. One kind of interesting thing about the Naga that they fought right outside the mine is that they narrated that it was strangely fast for its size. That was, I think, potentially just played to be like, whoa, so scary. What's going on? This ain't your mother's Naga. But I think it also potentially could have been a bit of foreshadowing. I think that our halfling is going to have been kind of made into an abomination, and it's going to be a very fast, almost monk-like dungeon boss, where it's going to be like running around. Maybe it even gets like some sort of benefit from hitting like multiple people within the same turn. I could really see that being an interesting boss. And honestly, now that I say it, kind of an interesting premise for a monk subclass. Monks are, meant to be able to run around, hit a lot of people. I think Way of the Drunken Master might have a feature that promotes that, but in general, I think that could be kind of interesting of like a monk subclass where you do like extra damage the first time you hit someone, like per person per turn. So it's like if you're hitting like 3 separate people, you're doing like, I don't know, say your proficiency bonus in extra damage on each hit. That could be kind of fun. But that's kind of the vibe I'm getting off of this. I think that that's one of the things that I'm anticipating here. But with that being said, we will jump into episode 2. I will be pausing and unpausing, giving my thoughts, responding to chats. So the episode is 3 hours. I will bet that this takes us maybe 5 to get through, because I do pause relatively frequently to chat. But it wouldn't be transformative if I didn't. I don't want to just restream their content. So let's do it.
Hey, hello! Nice to meet you. What can I do for you?
You must be Hearus?
I am. The foreman of this here fine mine.
Wonderful to meet you. I've heard wonderful things about you.
Oh, have you? From who?
From Lord Gracebine himself.
Really? Oh. All right.
Seems unlikely.
Well, how can I be of service?
We were curious. I'm sure you witnessed all of this.
Who decided that dwarves are like Scottish? Right? Is it literally just like a stereotype that Irish people and dwarvish people, I don't even know if it's a stereotype, if it's just that like Irish people are generally shorter, and then at some point Irish became halfling and so dwarvish became Scottish. It's just known. I've never questioned it. Dwarves have always been Scottish and halflings are like Irish, but it's a weird thing that we've all agreed on, that is the way it is.
There's wonderful goblins and trolls and other nonsense coming monsters.
My halflings are Italians.
Oh, terrible.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
I'm super down with that.
Chin for a living goes,
Tiny little mobsters like like 1920s era mobsters like I can't do Italian. Halflings are Midwestern. That would make sense to me because they're all like, they're in like their dirt kind of hovels. That one, they're all like in like dirt contact homes out in like Western Kansas. That's where all the halflings live. I feel that. I love the halfling mob. That's a really fun one.
I mean, there is a subterranean level as well. We have an elevator inside that brings the various mine carts to and from. But,
Verticality.
Is there a
very
particular
cool.
area on that map that most of the baddies seem to be coming from?
No, we've closed it off
Just
each
kind
time.
of everywhere.
Oh no.
Sort of everywhere. I mean, instantly the thing that I heard that I really took away from that is there's a level and then there's another subterranean level and there's an elevator between the two. That is great for level 9 characters because some of the more powerful spells can probably bust through those levels, as well as you're adding a shortcut that they could break, they could use, enemies could use against them. All of this, like, having, like, horizontal is fine, but the moment that you add verticality to your dungeon and or combat in general, I think that's the moment that things really kick into high gear. I wish that there was a nice virtual there's a nice virtual tabletop that allowed for good 3-dimensional play, like easy 3-dimensional play. Roll20 just doesn't quite get there. It's all right, and you know they have the handouts that you can give people. You can embed images in there, but that's like graphic design. I can't do that. So yeah, it's online play is really dope, but I do miss having an in-person session. That's one of the other things that I've been thinking about is running an at-home game with my wife and some other people. Roll20 has such verticality as Doom. Dude, you said it. I've thought about this so much that they have layers. Like, they have a specific tool in Roll20. Let me just get on my fucking soapbox for a second. They have a tool that is called layers. They have the DM layer, the map layer, and the object layer. Why, as a DM, can I not add object layers? It's ludicrous. And why can my players not navigate between those layers on their UI? Like, imagine if you could make a multi-level dungeon with multiple different, like, tokens being on multiple different levels, and they layer on top of each other on the actual UI. Like, you know, maybe you can't see all of them at a time. You have to switch between the layers. Right now, the closest that you can do to that is either have all of the layers on the same screen, but, like, you know, kind of displaced from each other, and then you mark, like, the connections. It's like, oh, like, you know, tunnel A goes to this other tunnel A. Or you can have the different levels be on different pages, and you have to, like, move the characters between that, like the player view between that. It sucks. And they have layers. So just make more. Let me make more. It's ridiculous. Roll20 works for battle maps, and that's about it. I agree. Maybe Hexcrawl. I'll give it Hexcrawl maps. That's it. That's all Roll20 gets out of me. Is battle maps and Hexcrawl maps. Otherwise, throw it out the window. But I still use it, because what the fuck else are you going to use? If we could add layers like Photoshop into Roll20, that would be super mega coconuts. Oh my god, I agree. And exactly, it's not like it's a revolutionary concept. It's in Photoshop, it's in GIMP, it's in Canva, probably. And if you did that, it would be so much easier to represent verticality, especially if players can move between the layers on their UI and they have the ability to shift their token between layers. So they say, like, oh, I'm walking up the stairs, shift to upper layer. Oh, mwah. If Roll20 puts out that update, it'll be Christmas. I'll make a video about it, man, because that would just be incredible. If Wizards of the Coast worked that into, like, the proprietary VTT that they're trying to shove down people's throats, it's like crafting in 1D&D. If they make certain big changes, I might move my hair out of the way to listen. You know what I'm saying?
Do you know if there's any other entrances into the mine? Any maybe old secret tunnels, something that someone could be using to get in?
Not to the mine. This is all proprietary. This is the business we run, so we don't have any internal or secret entrances. That would leave us open to any sort of a thief to come in and steal our mithril.
And what's security like on the mine? Is there...
Okay. So it would be understandable if this mine only had one entrance, like, for the exact reason that dwarf just gave. But there's a concept that I'm actually making a video about right now called Jacquaysing the dungeon. And one of the big points that this concept hits home, and, you know, if you want to hear me explain the full thing, you'll just have to wait. I'm sorry. But one of the big things that it hits home is that adding multiple entrances and exits to your dungeon just heightens the possibilities so much. It improves the dungeon immeasurably. Because bottlenecks, while interesting, are only interesting if they can be subverted. It's this very interesting concept of if your players can fully blockade themselves in, they should either need 2 blockades, and one of those could fail at any given time, or they should have to be like kind of worried about it, because there could potentially be another entrance further on in the dungeon. We'll wait for the video for me to go into it more, but it's very interesting that she's asking about this, because the concept of multiple entrances and exits in dungeons is one with actually a lot of discussion and like analysis around it.
Magical properties.
Enchanted arrows.
Yes.
She's asking for.
He kind of glanced over his shoulder and says, we haven't had much of a request for arrows in a while. We have bolts and crossbows, as that seems to be the staple for the carvers of the city. I have 2 sleep arrows, perhaps, if that is of interest to you.
Oh, take
what would
them.
you charge
Yes,
for
they would
those,
be very much.
That's right.
Yeah.
I should build some interesting arrows.
So I would call this, I'd say that there's like 2 general ways to handle shopping. It is either the waiter method or the tour guide method, which is like, and they're doing more tour guide of like, you ask for what you want, I tell you if we have it, and I tell you how much it costs. And then there's also the menu option, and the menu option is just like you give the players a list of what's there, and that's all that's there. And I think that the tour guide option can be good, and sometimes you just have to do it if you're not anticipating them going to a particular store and you haven't prepared it ahead of time. But I would say if there's a store that you're like pretty sure the players are going to go to, I find in my experience that it really expedites shopping if you give them the menu, because they don't have to go through the whole song and dance when it ultimately doesn't matter. And that's sort of what I'm getting from this is like, again, Travis's take at the beginning of like, okay, guys, like take a 5. We're going to be here a while, when it really shouldn't. It's not important. It's bookkeeping. Let's get to the action.
He goes ahead and accepts your gold. Go ahead and mark off 4,200 gold.
I did
for you, sir.
already.
All right, very well. Thank you for your patronage. I look forward to hopefully having you back when you return with whatever artifacts you manage to find.
Thank you.
Big,
it's very
expensive
nice.
artifacts.
So you're one of the most charming people we've met so far.
And it smells pretty in
And
here.
of course, they come in rare ordnance in the city, it seems. You hear under his breath a little bit of a mutter. Apparently, it's like elves don't like dwarves. It's weird.
Do we sleep before we get to go kill shit?
Yeah.
We're gonna go
Or can
sleep.
we go do that?
Let's go sleep and then get up in the morning and go down and kill things.
And I'd love to do a crafting roll right before I go to sleep, just to put together.
And this is something that's interesting. I'm really curious to see. Mark this down. I'm going to bet he doesn't do it. And this is something that I feel like I've heard Matt Mercer talk about something that he got better at, but about introducing clocks, introducing time frames to your players. It should not feel like Skyrim, where you can go and do the main quest whenever the hell you feel like it. You can do the main quest immediately, or you can do the main quest 3 years from now while you're doing all the different side quests and everything else. In D&D, it should feel like if you ignore something for even a day, the situation changes. If you put off one day, it should be different. Like, you shouldn't be able to just infinitely retain your resources, especially in D&D. D&D, at its core, is designed for the crawl. It's designed for you to slowly expend your resources as time progresses. And if you're not doing that, if you're allowing players to sleep whenever they want, long rest in dungeons, what have you, you are kind of inherently unbalancing the game. Like, that's just not how D&D was designed to go. So this idea of like, okay, we had this battle, now we'll, and we're aware of a danger, now we'll long rest. If they don't take actions, and sometimes you can't take actions, sometimes it is the most reasonable thing to long rest, but there should still be a threat. You come down and maybe one of the guards outside talks about rumbling that they heard, or like additional things happening overnight. that indicate to the players like, oh yeah, like if we take too long, if we long rest after every battle, the situation is going to deteriorate. There's going to be additional risk factors if we take our time too much.
Familiar about the markings? Anything like if I can identify
It's just stuff getting ripped off the
any
wall,
signs
right?
of something mystical that's come through here?
Like a portal or
That'd be more of an investigation
Oh,
roll.
well, all right.
I'm gonna look for tracks.
Okay, that'd be an investigation roll.
I'm
for you as
gonna
well.
I'm gonna assist her look for
Scared, I
animal
don't know
tracks.
which one to
I'm
roll.
going
Both
to
my die have been rolling
I'm
so
going to detect
bad.
for a while.
All right.
And looking at the
Alright, roll
mine.
heal.
This one is no longer in service.
Wow.
Put it in dice jail.
Well, hers is a lot better.
Good.
Something I hear a lot about with Matt that he's really good at, that I think is a general life skill, I don't think it's just a D&D skill, is he is very comfortable sitting in silence, waiting for his players to respond, to come up with things to do. And when he doesn't need to, he very calmly and patiently just sits there and waits. And just waits for them to interact with him. And I think that is... I've seen that attributed to why Critical Role feels so different from a lot of other actual plays, is because Matt is so willing to step back and let the players shine. But I think in general, I was actually just talking about this earlier today, that I think being able to sit in silence with someone can be a really powerful life skill when it comes to the professional environment, interpersonal environments. I think that just being able to sit in a comfortable silence can be a powerful, like, aggressive move in a negotiation. It can be incredibly good for interpersonal dialogue, to not have to inject your thoughts constantly and let the other person direct the conversation if it's very emotional for them. So this is something I would think about as a player and as a DM, is how often are you injecting in places you don't need to inject? Something I have to think about a lot. Obviously, I'm a content creator. I'm streaming. I have a problem keeping my thoughts to myself. So it's something I have to very actively work on, which is why it's so top of mind for me.
Sorry,
You guys go ahead and approach the elevator. It's a large wooden platform with a series of chains. My really terrible, hastily drawn map there for you.
That's right.
It's kind of crap, but it's kind of great.
It was actually more designed as a DM utensil, but
Oh, look at that. Okay, so we can finally we can see the map now. I think that Crude maps, number one, he's like, oh no, my map is so bad. Crude maps are great, especially when you're giving them to players. Exact maps are lame, if you ask me. I have a short about that did really, really well. I fully encourage DMs not to give their players world maps ever, and to in the majority of the time have the players draw their own world maps and like give their own estimates and ideas of how far apart things are and what direction they are. If you're doing a lot of traveling, I think that adds a lot of really fun options for communication mishandling, for getting lost. I mean, adds a lot of real, problems that feel real, problems that, are kind of wiped away by the video game world map. And even with dungeon maps, if it's something that they got from an NPC outside, having it be rough and not exact measurements can be amazing. Especially as a DM, you can say, hey, you're kind of holding your map up. You're looking at this, and this doesn't look right compared to your map. It adds a layer of intrigue, a layer of mystery. So, Matt, do not apologize for your crappy map. I think crappy map is good map.
Sweet, that does not hit.
what'd you roll?
11.
With disadvantage. So you rolled an 11 total?
10.
Oh, you missed.
Yeah.
So as you aim your firebolt,
Okay.
you just kind of.
Last time I talked about some pet peeves that I have, and one of them being like, oh, can I roll this? And I do call it a pet peeve. It's not that bad. Like, being like, can I roll perception? Can I roll investigation for this thing? I much prefer it when players say, like, I want to do this thing, and then the DM asks for a check. I mean, that is, like, by the book, by the rules, how it's supposed to be done, and I think it leads to more flexibility with what the DM asks for. And just allows the DM to just not ask for rolls as often. But not that bad, just a pet peeve. Another pet peeve of mine is when players say they roll, they look at the value, they don't say the value, they just say, oh, that doesn't hit. I don't know, for that like really, because something could have changed, maybe the AC got lowered somehow and you don't know that as the player. Obviously that doesn't happen very often, but I don't know, it takes creative power away from the DM. And I don't think that players want to do that. Like, DMs or players want the DM to be able to make creative decisions for the good of the story and the good of the game. And so just being like, that doesn't hit. Especially when I don't think they know the lower boundary yet. Maybe they do. Maybe they know that, like, a 13 wouldn't hit, and so he knows that a 10 wouldn't hit. But still, I don't know. Unless it's a well-defined, like, it's a 13 and you roll an 8, and then I would rather you say, like, oh, it's below what we already know. I don't know. Again, not that bad, just a pet peeve. So they're probably going to give a kind of recap story-wise, but my recap, after kind of digesting the episode 2, reading some of the comments back and forth, I think that my really big takeaway from episode 2 is still, oh my gosh, 7 players. But more specifically, oh my gosh, it is really hard to run combat in D&D for a live audience with 7 players and make it entertaining and not boring. It seems really difficult. From the comments that I read, they get progressively better at it, so I am really curious to see how it evolves over time. But specifically last session, that combat was a drag.
Teeth are kind of yellow and gnarled and sharp.
How close to death's door is she?
She's
Oh,
sputtering blood.
thank you, wonderful people.
There's more coming. This is the vegan pizza.
Pizza. I think I'm really interested to see how the party as a whole handles this. And I actually think that this sort of situation is a perfect situation for players to think about when they are creating their character's personality, when they're really like sitting down to determine who is my character, what are they like, what is their moral compass. Because sitting down and thinking about this, I don't know how the Duergar is going to react, but imagine for a second as a thought experiment that the Duergar is totally silent, won't respond to you at all. They have information about this intellect devourer that has done this thing to your friend. They obviously have more information because they've referenced this master type character. So clearly they have a lot of information that you want that will likely be critical to the success of your quest. How far are you willing to go? Really, like, sit there and think about that for your character. How far are you willing to go? Are you willing to resort to violence? Are you willing to resort to mind alteration? I mean, this is a sentient creature with language and culture and hierarchy. And, this is maybe not, it's presented as a monster, Duergar, but Duergar are a playable race. Maybe, I don't know if they were at this point, but now in modern 5e, they are a playable race. So how far, what are you willing to do to another sentient creature in order to potentially save your friend, And then kind of go down that thought experiment with your character to really suss out their morality. Let's pretend that now Grog isn't downed. Maybe he resisted the save, or he made the save. He resisted the effect of the intellect devourer. All this Duragar has is information that would give you an advantage going into the next fight. Again, what is your character willing to do to it? And now this gets into, like, I think that is just a great thought experiment for anyone to run through. But this also does get a bit into advice and my own personal taste. I think that the most interesting characters are on neither extreme of the scale. I think that the characters that are like no limits, like I'll do anything to anyone to get an advantage, that can start feeling very hard to invest in, because that lack of empathy for other human creatures, or not human creatures, but other sentient creatures, can actually get difficult to roleplay, because it becomes hard to justify forming bonds with other people. And then the totally opposite side of, we can't interrogate them at all. If they don't want to talk, we're hands off. That can be somewhat unnecessarily, not blocker. It can impede progress a little bit too much. I think that one is more okay than the, do whatever. But I think that if you're wanting to make a really interesting and kind of morally complex character, finding a line that is somewhere in the middle, so like you're okay with this stuff but not okay with this stuff, I think allows for a lot more drama and conflict within the group, and also still allows for compromise. So something to think about.
Slime, but sure enough, the inside of the cranium itself is mostly bacon.
Lovely. Trinket. No, he's not with us.
Trinket's back at the party.
So we can only assume that.
Should we
What was his name?
rejoin our fellows?
Yeah, I guess it seems like it's safe enough, right? Around here right
We
now.
come running up.
No.
We do. Traipsing. We traipse up.
Skipping.
As silently as possible. You come running up. All right.
There's also, something that I kind of talked about yesterday. So another really important thing to think about as a player is what sort of role you fit within the narrative structure of the party. And you can fit multiple roles. You can change roles as you go. And I think that Travis Grog is a very good example. I talked last week about how Vax is a good example of the leader, where he keeps good perspective, and when he makes a decision, people pretty much fall in line. And Grog is a great example of the narrative strongman, where he takes action, right? Like he does things to make drama, to make sure that we don't get stuck in a rut of planning and thinking too much. And it doesn't have to be dumb characters or even strong characters that fulfill this type of narrative role, but it's people that do things. They take action. Grog goes over to the campfire. He walks into the town. He makes sure that things don't get too meticulous, too planned out. A button pusher. That's a fantastic way to put it. The strong man is the button pusher. He's he'll get antsy. He makes things happen. He pushes it forward, because you can really easily in D&D get really bogged down in the details of okay, I don't see anything else. Can I check the roof? Am I sure that there's no trapdoors? Are you sure that we should call them up, or maybe we should discuss further? Travis just goes. He says, "We've been talking for too long. I'm going." And it's great. Every D&D parties need that sort of forward force, that forward momentum, to make sure that you don't get bogged down and suddenly you look around and you realize that you've been talking about your plan for 40 minutes and you haven't really been playing. So I think that is a really important aspect of any D&D party.
Essentially,
it would be this enhanceability.
It would be enhanceability for
I'll tell you.
wisdom, I'm pretty sure.
I think it's wisdom. No,
But
no,
not-
no, no, no. It's
not
intelligence.
Intelligence for fun. Okay, there you
Because
go.
I think it's like Owl's wisdom for.
Right, no, you're
wisdom.
correct. Yeah. So essentially, it would be an enhanced ability for intelligence. Yes.
How long does it last?
For the potions of effect, that would be anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. You're not
Maybe
quite
you
sure.
should wait until we come across something.
All right, but
Yeah,
if
you
it's
would.
too
You have
late,
advantage.
Just don't
on
go running off
intelligence
into the
checks.
dark again. And
Intel-
Oh man, let me get on my soapbox really quick about fucking potions, dude. You might know if you follow me on TikTok or if you've seen my YouTube shorts, the magic items that I create, that I homebrew, very, very rarely have charges or limited uses. Sometimes they do, but pretty rarely. I'm more of a fan of passive buffs that are weaker than kind of these resource type magic items, and that goes for consumables as well, because I so often find that I will give characters or players consumables like potions, scrolls, what have you, and they are so reticent to use it. Like Grog is coming into a situation where he is worried about getting brain sucked again. They have all this evidence of brain suckers around, and he's like, let me down this. And they're all like, hey, whoa, maybe you should slow up. Maybe you should slow up. And I'm not even saying that they're wrong in this case. This is probably the right solution. Grog should pop the potion the next time he sees a brain sucker type deal. But this type of hold back, this type of don't use it, it's too good to use, is something that I so consistently find with potions that aren't healing potions. Like healing potions, it's pretty it's clearer at least when you should use them and when it's appropriate to use them. But potion of giant strength and large reduce, I so often find that they just languish in players' inventories because players are too afraid that it would have been better to use it later. So I very rarely give out consumables that aren't healing potions.
Best you can see in the distance, you see figures shifting, moving away from you. Many figures. A fairly large group of seem to be humanoid figures moving steadily away from you.
Can we scout ahead?
Yeah,
We're both
we're gonna
really super
start
stealth.
kinda-
Can we
Alright, yeah, using
quickly dash
your
after.
same stealth rolls, you guys push
Okay.
forward.
Humanoid figures, you said.
Yes.
Could be anything.
Best you can tell. As you guys start reaching the outskirts of the opposite side of this small goblin village that has been completely sundered, you see a cliff, but a large cliff. The actual surface here comes to a very direct end and seems to just disappear into a dark abyss. There is a singular 10-foot wide rope bridge that is bolted into the side of this cliff and stretches out across this giant crevasse for what you can't see the other side.
This feels like the descent.
You
I
can
don't like
s-
this, you guys.
It very much has that kind of a feel. It just goes on for a good 60, 70 feet and then darkness. And you can see what looks to be a cluster of about 12 to 13 Duragar making their way in lines of 2 across this bridge. Amongst them, they have chained up 3 dwarf miners that they are also dragging across the bridge.
We have to save those.
What do
miners.
the miners look like? Are they?
Oh, that's amazing. Oh man, that's a great moral quandary. That's a great dilemma. Because when he's describing this bridge in my head, I'm like, oh, they're level 9. They probably have fly. I know that they have a flying carpet. Like, I've been in a situation like that where I set up a trap and a kind of a sequence in a dungeon where the fact that there was a big chasm was very integral to the nature of the puzzle. And I forgot that I'd given my characters a broom of flying, and they just bypassed it. So when he first started describing this, I was just like, fucking classic DM mistake, not remembering how high level they are. But this is so much better. This is the challenge is not how do you get across. It's a moral question of how do you get across when there are 20 to 30 enemies along with innocence, because there's a very obvious way to take care of the enemies. It's just cut the bridge. And now you've taken the fact that they are high level and that they do have other options other than using the bridge, and you flipped it against them. You've now said, oh yeah, you have those options. Are you going to use them? What are you going to do? That is how to design good dungeons and puzzles and traps for high-level characters. Because high-level characters will have resources. They will have tools to overcome a lot of your purely like skill and resource-based puzzles. So presenting them with moral puzzles, moral quandaries, is, I think, a much more engaging way to make stuff for high-level characters. That is chef's kiss.
Side. And you're feeling uncomfortable pushing further forward because you're now starting to get a lot more eyes.
Okay, are there any, does it look like, do we see any cavern opening?
I will say, so this is something that I've gone back and forth on throughout my tenure as a DM, is telling characters how they feel. Because I think that, like, you know, when you look at it on its face, it's like you're taking away agency from that character. You're telling them how they feel. You're not allowing the player to role play. However, as I've played more D&D, as I've played other systems, I've sort of come to the realization and the opinion that telling a character how they feel works very sparingly. But it does work, and it's really good shorthand to not have to describe a lot of things in too much detail where it bogs down the pace of the session. Because he could have described enough things to make them feel uncomfortable. And debatably, the things that he had already described should have already made them feel uncomfortable. But Laura is now saying, like, oh, let's touch down, because they didn't quite, you know, talk about, like, okay, so there is this camp. But, like, when I was listening to that in my mind palace, I thought that the camp was, like, right on the edge of the crevasse. So it wouldn't have been possible for them to land. So it can be really tricky, because there's always going to be a disconnect between what everyone is imagining. And so for the DM to just say, like, hey, like, you're feeling uncomfortable with how close you're getting, that is really easy shorthand to kind of let the players know a situation before they maybe do something that they might regret. Or they make a decision that is probably not what they would have done, and they're only doing it because of a lack of description and because of a mismatch in their own mental map. And I think that it kind of, so this discussion is kind of limited to, you know, DMs that know their players and their players' characters really well. How it affects you is up to you, but X evokes sensation, emotion, awareness of unease, sadness, danger. That's very fair. Yeah, like, just saying, like, the distance that you are away from the camp is starting to make you uncomfortable or evoke a sense of unease or discomfort. That's a good template for how to state it, Sam, because that is a really good verbal shorthand to overcome that disconnect of saying, like, okay, your characters are in the scene. Your characters see everything, even if you don't as a player. So telling you sometimes, oh, your character is starting to feel this, is a good shorthand to get the players up to speed on the situation that they're in. But I think it really only works if the DM has a really deep knowledge of the player and of the player character. Because, you know, if someone wouldn't be uncomfortable and then you say that, and then later they kind of get a better understanding of the situation and they say, oh, I wouldn't have been uncomfortable there, it can remove investment. It can feel separated. Yeah, this is Matt just knowing his players and their characters really, really well, and I think Laura asked for that clarification. I'm not sure if she asked specifically about, like, how I'm feeling, but she was asking for general clarification. which is, again, it's Matt realizing like, oh, I'm having trouble fully communicating this scene in a concise manner because it is kind of a complicated scene. There's a lot going on. And I know Vex well enough to know how she would be feeling. I know Vex, and Scanlan well enough because they're level 9. They've been playing for months at home, and now they've been playing for weeks on Twitch. So I do definitely think that this is an example of like Matt knew how the characters would be feeling and wanted to get them up to speed really quick so that they didn't do something that because of a disconnect.
Worst show ever. Okay.
Biggest IP thief ever exists.
But that was one of the captives. Do I see where the other captives were taken?
The 2 other captives, you follow them.
IP mosquito.
They both are pulled to essentially a western side. If you're looking overhead from the entrance point, this is where the barrack building is up here. This is where you guys enter.
That was fun. That was the first like big Matthew Mercer monologue. And that's a fun way to introduce a villain. I like the I like the initial so just in general the thing I liked about that was that you're already in a situation where you really know you can't fight. Like you're not going to be able, you're in the middle of this camp, you're stealthed in. So I think that already great time to do a monologue. If all 7 of them were there, that monologue could have gone differently because, there's part of Tiberius or Percy that might think like, oh shit, like I can make that shot. So the fact that all 7 of them weren't there, I think makes this a really prime position to kind of deal with that. Sounds good, John. Because if all of them are there on the edge of the camp and this Illithid, I think that's what it is. Is that? Let me make sure I'm referring to it. Yeah, it's an Illithid, I think. This Illithid walks out, Percy whips out the bag news and potentially takes a shot. Now, I'm not saying that would have been bad or really anything, but it wouldn't have allowed you to deliver this really fun cinematic monologue. And I know that that's one of the things that Matt is known for. And if that's something that you want in your campaign, you want these big dramatic monologues, then aiming for a place where it doesn't make sense for the players to interrupt it is really important. So I think that placement was really good of just Scanlan is there. And he is there in such a way that he can get a pretty good view of what's happening. But there is no bone in his body that is planning on interrupting. And the second thing that he did, just beyond the party not being there, is he describes the very intimidating dwarf first. Someone that maybe all of them together could take on, really looks like a boss in and of himself. And then he separately describes this creature in the hood that is the real kind of more big bad villain. And so that setup to the scene allowed for him to do this big thing where Scanlan would want to stay and witness this, but there's no part of him that is getting involved. So I think that was just really, really expert placement on the monologue. Samuel, you left me a message while I was gone. If you have enough info prep as the DM to do something that can make players intrigued, is stating roll X or Y and then they both give you a baseline info but can vary on detailed info, like religion versus arcana. I completely agree. I really like offering this is one of the reasons I've talked about one of my pet peeves is when players ask me if they can make a specific check. Is because a lot of times I will offer them different checks. And at this point, my players that I've DM'd for, they eventually, kind of knew that depending on the check that they chose, they would get info that was more kind of in that direction in terms of detail. So they could either choose, the skill that they were more proficient in, but maybe didn't give them the exact detailed info that they would want, or vice versa, where they maybe try the harder check. So yeah, I think that playing around with the skill checks, I think that skill checks and the attributes and advantage are the real highlights, the real stars of D&D. They allow you to abstract a ton. And playing around with that is something that can really take your DMing to the next level of not just looking at this is the DC, this is the check, this is the information they get if they pass the check. Playing around with that, having multiple levels of check, having multiple different types of, having multiple different skills that they can take, having compound checks where if someone wants to help them, they can only help them by making a different kind of skill check. And, you know, if one or both of those succeed, they get varying results. Playing around with that as a DM is, I think, one of like the next level things that you can really break into.
A bunch of dwarves being held against their will, and then one by one being their brains sucked by
And
Mr.
those
Lanky Man.
two big
Percy, could you take a look at this?
Two
book
big,
and see if
big
you can
trolls
read
and
the
ogres. Don't
switches
forget
a little bit?
ogres. There's ogres too.
There are ogres?
And yes, there are
Yes.
two big ogres as
Spam
well.
check.
And Duergar aplenty, maybe 4
Spread
dozen
throughout.
or so, 3 dozen.
Spread throughout the city, throughout this little camp, Scanlan.
Wandering, yes.
You know my
would
tactic.
it be a nature check to actually think if I'd ever learned about this in school? If this is one of the
It's be an intelligence check.
Also,
Be
you
an
learned
intelligence
about it,
check.
kind of. You should check too.
I think this is, I talked about this last episode about the restraint that Matt shows a lot of the time of not jumping in and talking. Speaking of something else that can take your DMing to the next level is knowing when to shut your fat hole and just let your players talk. This is the thing that I struggle with the most. Clearly, I am wanting to stream and make content. I have a problem keeping my thoughts to myself. I have a big tendency to jump in when it looks like players are like kind of going in circles. And sometimes just keeping your mouth shut and trusting your players to work it out. Sometimes they get into the analysis paralysis section. Like, that very much happens. But sometimes you will get your best RP out of that, of characters interacting and creating drama and conflict. And if you talk too much as the DM, you can interrupt and totally break the pace of that just in half.
We should use the volcano
I remember nothing.
as part
See
of
if
our
you know anything
strategy.
about intelligence.
Like Moses.
There's a volcano?
I'm an idiot.
Wait, no, the
Oh, the
pit.
lava down
Yeah.
there?
Oh,
There's a
You can
shitload of
direct
them.
it into the... No.
Well, no, we've had them.
Can I
This
meditate
seems-
to see if I know anything about this?
This seems to match up with the tales
Yeah,
that
Sam.
mine.
Yep. Giving, over-explaining, giving too much information. It's so hard because specifically because of the thing that we were talking about earlier about the mental disconnects. Like, as the DM, we are the arbiter of truth when it comes to the world. Like, we know everything that is in the world. Like, it's all up here. It is up to us. We decide what happens. And the players are trying to exist within that, and we want them to exist within that as best as they can. That's like the whole point. And so it can be really difficult to know that line of like, well, every single one of these details matters because it's all real. Like, this is all the situation. It might change what you do. And so finding that line, knowing when to shut up, know when to stop talking, it's a hard DM skill, man. It's and it's something I haven't DM'd in. I DM'd for the first time 11 years ago, 12 years ago, and I DM'd very consistently for like 8 years. And then I haven't DM'd in a year or two at this point. I've been playing for the first time regularly. And it's something that I know will be difficult for me when I go back to DMing is learning when to not talk. I'm really, there's a lot of, I would say that like I can see why Critical Role popped off in the way it did. Like, everything about this, like, I see the bones of what was so amazing about it. And most of my gripes or issues with it are things where it's like, oh, no one had done an actual play at this scale and of this production value before. So a lot of the issues that I see are things that it's like, oh, I have full confidence and faith that that'll get worked out. So yeah, I'm loving it so far, and I'm really loving catching a lot of the little details, and really kind of diving into them with chat. This is like, I love it. I thank you guys so much for watching. I'm loving like talking back and forth about the show to you guys. This is just amazing. I love it.
Let me do it. I can use my deck of illusions to generate any kind of number of sorts of creatures or whatever that I can control.
Deck of illusions.
I can simply toss one out, I believe 50 feet ahead of me, and control it. And
okay, hot take. Ooh, hot take soapbox. I think that illusion magic has the widest range of being like total trash to being amazing, depending on player creativity. I think that like player creativity plays the most role in illusion magic out of any magic. Like minor illusion is debatably the best cantrip in just available in D&D. Or it can be totally useless if like if the person doesn't use it well. And so the deck of illusions also has a huge tendency to either be a magic item that just sits in someone's inventory and literally never gets used, or be something that people are using constantly to great effect. Illusion scales with imagination. You are so right. A minor illusion can be more devastating than a fireball, like straight up. And it is something that it's one of those things that is actually kind of hard to role play, especially if you're playing a caster that is maybe less wise, because you might think of a clever solution with illusion magic that your character might not think of. But it can't really work in reverse. Like, even if your character is supposed to be like very clever, they're not going to think of clever solutions for illusion magic that you don't think of. It's this weird disconnect where, like, up to a point, you know, the game is the game, but up to a point, you know, your characters kind of can't be more creative than you, even though they can be stronger and smarter and have a better memory. Creativity is kind of where the game ends, which is very interesting. I love the versatility of prestidigitation, as the ways you can use it are almost up to your imagination. That is very true. I will say, if I have the choice between minor illusion and prestidigitation, I personally almost always do take prestidigitation, but I still think that minor illusion might edge it out in terms of the variety of applications, but I think it's very debatable. And I think I could come down on either side.
Either way, they're coming for us.
Maybe we could create a distraction and bring them away from the tunnel's entrance, and we can just sneak around them. No?
Again, Matt being nice and quiet.
Did you see
letting
the way
the players talk,
What?
letting them
To
plan.
sneak through the village to the tunnel? No, not all seven of us.
Relying on his intuition and his knowledge that one of them will push the button. I am circling Travis right now, but, you know, Scanlan might push the button. Vax might eventually do it. They have a couple of button pushers where Matt has trust in his players that if they are getting too down in the weeds, that there are a couple of characters that will push things forward.
Are you crazy? Come on.
Oh no, he's trying.
And as a DM, if you do see your players getting stuck in analysis paralysis, there are kind of two things to look at. Either look at it and say, okay, is something about the way that I'm presenting challenges causing this analysis, or are the players not taking enough action? because there are kind of two sides of this coin. If you're a DM where every other door is fake, 3/4 of the chests are mimics, that every hallway has a pitfall, like maybe they're gonna have a bit of analysis paralysis. But if they're sitting there and they're taking too long, having a very candid conversation with them afterwards of the session ends, maybe they sat there and they just planned for half the session. Sitting there after the session and kind of breaking it down with them and saying, hey guys, like, I had a lot of fun. That was really great. I did notice that you guys are taking a lot of time to plan. Is that fun for you? Or maybe one of you should think about, maybe being a more button pusher, action man sort of role. And if you notice that you're getting too bogged down, you push forward. Having candid conversations with your characters, or sorry, not with characters, with your players like that throughout the life of the campaign is super important. Having those conversations in session 0 is important as a base, but repeating those conversations over and over and over throughout the campaign is how you keep things nice and healthy, and you make sure that everyone is having fun and things aren't kind of fizzling.
To kill us. All right.
I'll stay on this side of the bridge. Who wants to go be a distraction? Who wants to be the bait? Who's real fast?
Well, wait. Are we doing his bait or are we doing a real bait?
I don't.
We can try both.
What if you cast something big and they turn us against us? That could suck.
Oh, it's fake. It's just
it's an illusion.
hologram.
Oh, and I'll also point out, I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, but I actually think that this dynamic right now is pretty instructive. Grog, so far, and Scanlan have both been action men, but they are both kind of nervous about these two overlapping plans. At this point, when the action men are like, we don't know what decision to make, and we will, probably feel bad about pushing the action forward because these are two very distinct plans. At this point, the leader needs to step in. Vax has been relatively quiet. He hasn't been as quiet as Percy, but we talked about that earlier. That's IRL stuff. At this point, someone needs to take charge. He's the idea man. He came up with one of the plans. Someone else came up with another one of the plans. I think it was maybe Laura, maybe Scanlan, maybe Vax. I don't remember. But at this point, Vax, acting as the leader, needs to make a decision. He needs to say, okay, we're doing this. Fucking break. And if someone does feel overridden in character, if players out of character feel overridden, that's an interpersonal problem that you guys need to hash out afterwards. But if characters feel overridden, like you didn't take my plan, the character, not the player, that makes great drama. That's great drama. That's conflict. That's character moments. That's great. So sometimes making choices, as long as all the players are cool, making choices that might upset a character are very valid and sometimes are good for later and can keep the current pace moving. So that comes into a joke that I posted pretty early on in one of my TikToks where I talked, half a joke, half not a joke, where sometimes, especially if we're in person, and I have my screen set up, I will just roll dice sometimes. Like, I'll just pick, they'll just be, doing their thing, and I'll just, roll a die. No reaction. Die doesn't mean anything. It's not there I'm not doing it for any particular reason. It's just to keep them on their toes. I'll separate that from the rest of, most of the advice I've given in this video, I stand by and truly believe is very good advice. My tendency to just roll things for no reason, I don't know if that's good. I don't know if I would take that part of my DMing and pass it on. It's something that gives me joy as someone who likes little harmless pranks, to just kind of fuck with my players like that. But I don't know if it's necessarily good. I don't know if I'd recommend it. They do random phantom rolls to put the players. Dude, I'm telling you. It's again, it depends on the vibe of the campaign. It depends on, if you even want the players to be on their toes or not. But yeah, man, if the players are getting too complacent, or that's one of my strategies to combating analysis paralysis is, if my action man, if my button pusher hasn't pushed the scene forward as quickly as I think they should have, if I'm feeling the pacing drop, yeah, dude, sometimes I'll just take a D20 and spin that shit. And sometimes, and I do hidden traps sometimes. Sometimes I do like wandering monsters. There are a lot of times I have like danger clocks that I do roll for and that are real rolls, but sometimes I mix a phantom roll in there just to see what happens. DMs did that all the time. It gave everyone at the table instant anxiety. Yeah. And I mean, you don't want your characters to live in a constant state of fear. That's actually what breeds analysis paralysis, is if they're in too much fear. But using it sparingly to ratchet things up, oh man, it's a fun strat.
Yeah.
There is one outcropping of like a large stalagmite that you could probably get behind.
Oh, on the goblin side.
The goblin side. Do you want to be on their side?
I want to be on our side.
Your side meaning the side.
And this is something that I talked about earlier when it comes to theater of the mind and whiteboards. Oh, man. Oh, that's a title for a long right there. Ooh, might make that someday. But when it comes to theater of the mind, drawing out not a map necessarily. I wouldn't even go so far as to be so generous as to call it a map. But drawing out very abstract symbols. I think it's best if they are kind of spatially relative. So you say, okay, if the bridge is like a line, if it's the thickness of the line, the chasm's about this big, and kind of drawing all of that out on a whiteboard, nothing specific. It's just like you take like another color pen and be like, this boundary area is where the camp is. Don't even get detailed of like, oh, it's denser over here or the no. Just, okay, this general area is the camp. This big area is the cave. These lines are the chasm. This is the bridge. These are the exits. That's it. And just that visual reference makes this sort of communication easier. So instead of saying my side, your side, goblin side, this, that, the other, it is so much easier to point on a map and say the stalagmite is here-ish. And then if they ask for distances, that's fine. That's them getting more detailed, but it's not them being confused. And even with that conversation that Grog and Scanlan were having about which side they're cutting the rope on, you have another player with another whiteboard marker, and it's like, okay, we're cutting the rope here, circled, done. So, I don't recommend getting super detailed with every single room you go into, every single situation you're in. But I do recommend, especially for a place where you're going to spend a decent amount of time, drawing a very abstract representation of the area.
I take Tiberius by the arm like this. Vox Machina.
Vox Machina.
Okay, so I stealthily walk.
They said it! The name of the show is... what? This is Vox Machina.
And then we have, of course, behind him.
I love
Shuffle
naming
these, right?
your
Yes.
adventuring parties, by the way. I think naming your adventuring party is cool. And gives the characters a fun frame of reference in game.
Your side.
like
Right now, is it okay? Well, then I don't do that because you can't fly yourself. So I do grapple instead.
Okay. You grab him as his whole weight goes on.
Orion, don't be so about it. Come on. I don't know. I don't think that it was that unclear what was happening. That I think that was more he wasn't paying as much attention as he might have should have been. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. People have bad days. But that was a little like it's like, if there's a miscommunication, that's okay. It's just be like, oh, I didn't realize that. Sorry. Be nice.
What's your strength?
I'm sure Orion's nice. Otherwise, Tiberius is very fun, but that was kind of
Going
Care, take me down. Hang on, let's go see.
This is great. This is great. I talked last time about a concept called Jacquaysing the dungeon that I do plan on making a video about. That is it is a concept about how you should design maps, how you should design dungeons, and one of the like fundamental things that the strategy, I guess you could call it, recommends is multiple entrances and exits. So in this case where there's this cavern, there are 2 ostensible entrances and exits. The one they came in and then the one at the other end. You should always have more. So the idea that there are more hidden down in this cavern is great. Because now it's questionable, do the Illithids know about it? Do the Derugar know about it? There can be some good inter-enemy conflict there. It's something for the PCs to discover with a great check, so it really provides a good source of reward. And it doesn't even have to be hidden. You know, you could make it where there are just multiple entrances and exits, just flat out. But in any given environment, having it not be a straight line is almost always going to improve the design and give the players more strategic options and more creative options.
Friends. That's a word I haven't heard in a long time. Not one I take to heart.
Allies, dude, I love it. I'm so down with this. I'm so down with it. I love having like friend NPCs are a long and tried trope within fantasy. But I love explicit NPCs where it's like, we are only working together for now to accomplish this goal. I think that it just inherently leads to fantastic drama afterwards, because once the goal is complete, that's still a mind flayer. So even if you do get revenge, is it just gonna let you walk out of here? Are you just gonna let it go? It sucked brains. Confirmed. Definitely. I don't know. I am a huge fan of traitor arcs, especially when the traitors are joining the PC's side, because who is right, who is wrong, who is a traitor, who is who is a traitor to the cause versus who is like seeing the light of day, all depends on what side you're on. And so I think that the stories that you can tell with an enemy traitor character can be really fun, and the type of moral dilemmas that you put your players into can be really fun.
Very rigged and
if we were all hidden, we would have a distinct advantage.
I have a very large bronze pot in the bag of holding. Could I wear that on me noggin?
If you like.
Oh, it gives you a look in response. It says,
"This protects me from the..."
It's the bronze pot! Oh, I don't remember who told me about that, but I'm loving it. Grog, you national treasure, you. Senses. So hear me out, right? Kvarn, or Lady Kira or whatever, that's my theory, but who knows if that's right, is not actually a paladin. She's like a maybe not a devil, but I mean maybe even like a celestial warlock or some sort of warlock, and she has Gaze of Two Minds, and this just like you can use your action to maintain this connection. You know, if we're giving her like a monster stat block, let's say, she might be able to do multiple things. She might be able to cast certain spells as actions. You know, if we're powering her up a little bit, you have her charm the Elder Brain, and then so it's now friendly to you. It's willing. And this Gaze of Two Minds doesn't take concentration. So you charm it, Gaze of Two Minds through it. It connects it connects and controls all of the illithid. And it can see through them. They communicate stuff back and forth to it. And that's why the fucking eyes are the thing that you need. It's not the mind. The illithid needs to be able to see you because that's how Kvarn sees you, through Gaze of Two Minds. It's a theory. It's a fucking film theory. I'll tell you that. Matt just told him, in essence, you don't know if he heard the voices, but he believes he heard the voices. That's true. That's very true. It's like, I don't know if they'll let you go, but he thinks they will. Yeah. I love the pot scene and tend to use that as an example of how to not metagame and instead RP, because Travis did ask out of character if it would do anything. Matt said no, and then Grog just put it on anyways. I totally agree, Anna. I think that is a very good example and is very instructive on how to RP a character, of just like, it won't do anything, but it's fun, and so you just do it anyways. I think there are some players that need a little bit more of that, like, war game, power game sort of streak, but especially if you're into RP, but you're struggling on how to do it. I have had players say that to me before, that it's like, I want to RP more, but I don't know what to do. I agree with you, Anna, that Grog interaction is very instructive.
Nothing of my culture you presume to match.
I think we do understand your desires, though, and we can align ours with yours.
Yep.
So
this is interesting. I was curious. I was looking at the Mind Flayer stat block, and I was curious if this was Matt's invention or, if it was baked into the lore. But, like, Mind Flayers do not have, at least from what I can see here, like, a built-in hatred of magic in the arcane, but it is something so simple that just feels so right for a group, for an entire species, whose society and whose powers are built on psionics. A hatred of the arcane it's just great. It just works. It feels so right, especially for this sort of internal division. And kind of what I was talking about earlier, last episode, of looking at factions and finding internal divisions, because every faction is going to have them. Every organization will have internal divisions of separate, distinct groups of people who have differing beliefs, have differing issues, and finding those things and making them make sense. I mean, it's fucking great. I'm loving Clarota. Could easily integrate it in a non-illithid society, but of course Kalith is doing the naive Disney princess bit here. Yeah. I don't think Marisha May probably has any intention of bringing Clarota back, but yeah, Kalith is doing the, like, stars and poppies thing, which is very cool. It's good character interaction of bringing things out of Clarota, and of being able to RP and interact. Yeah. But I really love this bit of lore on, like, sorcerers in this psionic society are kind of branded as impure. Very, very cool bit of world building. That was the way Caleb wanted to go.
Resides in that camp. I know no way within the stronghold without the front of their army. Perhaps the general can me pry for information.
Sure.
Bring him to me.
Sure.
Bring him to you. You won't be accompanying us on any adventure? Or?
I will be coming.
But we have to fetch him.
And the general is in that
where you were.
Yes. All right. So we have to go over.
Okay. I'm figuring out the attack on the Derugar camp. This is something that I plan on talking about in a future video of like how you deal with villains, what the setup is, because I think that just being like, oh, here's the big bad villain, in this case Kvarn, and these are like lieutenants, and you have to kill the lieutenants in order to get to the big bad evil guy. And I think that that's kind of lame, like just having to kill people. But there's a very easy and very simple change that a DM can make to make it feel more engaging. It is not just that we have to kill the general, because they're essentially asking that. It's like, oh, do we need to kill him, or can we just like go around? And Clarota's like, I don't really care, but I don't know another way in. The general probably knows the way in, and so, we would ask them. And this gives the players options. It gives the players agency, because now we don't have to kill the general. We just need to get the information, which is actually somewhat more complicated. And if we don't want to engage with this, if we have other ideas, other plans, other resources, we can push on those if we really don't want to attack this camp. And so I think that little bit of narrative change makes going through the BBG lieutenants way more engaging for the players, significantly. And it turns this into like a kidnapping rather than like an assassination, like a burn down the town sort of deal. And I think that kidnappings as a motif for a session or a small arc are very engaging, because the escape is much more complicated. Restrainment is a whole thing that maybe an entire character has to be dedicated to. So it involves a lot more interesting things, and it allows players to be much more creative than just go and kill him. Yeah.
I mean, I can always turn into like a whale.
That's, well, I don't. Perhaps, but the water.
I do wish. I've been too positive. I've been complimenting Matt too much. So let me balance it out with some negatives. Matt does not talk nearly enough about audio and smell, which I've said multiple times. So the vibes are kind of hard to grasp within this dungeon, although I think he's making up for that through the character work. And I think it is kind of hard for the audience and even the players and the characters to understand exactly where things are, how things are laid out. I was definitely under the impression that the like old Duragar camp and like the Goblin village were like way further away, like definitely not within sight of the Duragar camp. And I don't know, and that might have just been something that I missed. But I think that a kind of nice abstract map would be very helpful in this case. But the actual design of the dungeon, how everything is laid out, I'm loving it.
They have been.
What do you think? What do you think?
What resides in that lake is something you wish not to tamper with. An ancient mind.
Blah, blah, blah. We've switched from DM advice to player advice mode. If you have the opportunity, if you have an info dump NPC that feels good, Liam just made a very nice choice to cut through a lot of the noise. It shouldn't be your first kind of go-to, and I doubt it ever would be, but you essentially have a line to the DM, right? Like, you can ask the NPC, hey, yo, what do you think? Hey, Mr. DM, through this character's lens, what do you think? And especially if the character is established, the NPC is established to be pretty intelligent, that can be like a good player shortcut towards punching through analysis paralysis.
Guys, then Grog, you can float down to the what do we call it? Take Vax here, and then I can. Oh shit! I need to be near you to cast it. Damn it!
Let's just land on the roof.
Just land on the roof.
Guys, it's not chess. It's not chess. I know it can be, And I know that I was like defending a lot of analysis, but it's like you guys are in the plan now. You guys are actively like ticking down the clock to when they will notice you. And I'll be honest, as a DM here, I'm starting to give signs to them. I'm starting to be like, you see some Derigar like maybe squinting at the sky. You can't tell if they've noticed you, but they seem to be noticing some sort of, like, I'm starting to push them. Analysis when they are totally safe on the other side of the chasm, all good. Analysis when they're hanging in the air right above the camp, we're starting to push.
To a central chamber.
So we're gonna go this way.
All right.
I've never seen laser pointers before, but that's clever. I might introduce a laser pointer system if I ever get to run in person again. I like it.
I pull Scanlan by the hand and we enter into this room.
This is so romantic.
All right.
I just use digital dice. Richard, are you referring to my TikTok? You can't trust digital dice. Have you seen the algorithm? Do you know if the digital dice are fair? I don't. You can't trust them. You can't put them in jail. You can't trust someone you can't put in jail. I could put my physical dice into a little cage. Let them know their place. Dude, even okay, if we go back to the Jacquaysing, the dungeon conversation, this, even if you just consider this a miniature dungeon and think about points of interest and the paths and the edges between those points of interest, as well as the entrances to the entire complex, you have an entrance over here and an entrance over there. Already, 2 entrances. Very good. Makes for better and more creative escapes, a lot more options when it comes to actually escaping the dungeon, as well as some potential for new enemies to be introduced from an angle other than you're expecting. So already fantastic. And then even here, obviously there are these Duragar guards. You kind of cut this down to its own miniature dungeon. Again, 2 entrances, multiple options, and which ones you take out, have a significant effect. If you take out these ones, you have guards from both sides coming, but if you go for these guards, you're placing yourself closer to an entrance that is harder to escape from, and it's more likely that you could get cut off. Whereas if you attack these ones, you have multiple options for potentially escaping, but you could also be surrounded, and it would be easier for them to get multiple attackers on you at once. So already some interesting options that we're seeing in the mini dungeon, as well as some nice loops. If you look at like this front room is a point of interest, this hallway is a point of interest, this hallway is a point of interest, and this entire room is a point of interest. And you see, if you consider like the exits to be part of this, you have an entire loop around the outside that connects through these doors. You have a miniature loop right here. You have a loop that goes from these guards into this point of interest, out here, all around to here. All of these loops allow for even a relatively small area to feel like it has a lot of options, even when all that Matt has shown us are guards standing in front of doors and some beds. I mean, there are so many options here. Again, looking at this point of interest as the fast grab armory, that gives a player with mage hand an option to make a distraction, potentially drawing these guards out into the other loop. And because it's a loop, you can rotate with the guards. Whereas imagine if this door wasn't here, it wasn't an actual loop, it was just a straight line, you would have it to where you can't cause that distraction anymore. Because you cause that distraction, they come in and you have to like do a stealth thing and like maybe sneak around them. But if they just poke their head in, no dice. So this looping nature is automatically, we see, better and has a lot more options than if it was just a straight line.
Side of the vehicle.
Okay, so this is a really minor thing that Matt does and that I know he has done in the past. I've heard it narrated and people talk about it, and it's something that I very often do in my games. And it used to be an explicit rule in D&D, but it got removed in 5e in favor of making things less complicated. There used to be a concept called where creatures were bloodied. And it was when a creature had lost half of its hit points, it was now bloodied. And in older editions, certain creatures would have like bloodied abilities. So they were abilities that they could only do or access once they were bloodied. They, again, removed all of that in 5e. But I do still really think that general concept of narrating a creature feeling pain and actually like acting sluggish, acting different, I start doing that when they are bloodied. So the moment they drop below half hit points, in this scenario you can tell, or at least my read of it, would be that the bullet is not under half HP, because Matt's like, oh, like they're, you do damage, but he kind of shrugs it off. He's not really feeling it. He's still ready to go. To me, he's not bloodied. But when he does get bloodied, that narration would be more like you see him stagger under the weight of your blows. He really seems to be feeling it. He seems mentally disoriented. Narration kind of like that. And I think that the halfway point is a really good point to start doing that. Some people will also do morale checks at those points, if you do morale checks. And bloodied abilities sound awesome, like a second phase boss fight in a video game. Dude, I could not agree more. I really wish that D&D creatures had more explicit phases or like extra abilities. I really wish that more creatures had lair abilities and could have lairs, especially like lower level creatures like a bandit boss. I wish bandit bosses had like lairs and lair actions. But yeah, bloodied abilities were super fucking cool. So some like the Berserker enemy, I think in 3.5, when they were bloodied, they would essentially gain like barbarian rage like abilities, where they would kind of go into a frenzy. It's easier to hit them, but it's easier for them to hit you, that sort of thing. Yeah, they were super fucking cool. And it's a real shame, especially with how much focus D&D and 5e by extension puts on combat. I mean, one of the 3 core books is a monster manual that is just a list of ways to fight creatures with a little bit of lore attached. For a system that's so like that, I would have liked to see more things like bloodied, more lair actions, things like that. But what are you gonna do? That aren't in an actual edition, but in the 1 D&D Unearthed Arcanas, one of them, they introduced a new form of exhaustion where instead of having like that tiered system that like fucking first tier is like disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls, instead it's just like level 1's like a -1 to everything you could ever roll, and then level 2 is a -2 and level 3 is a -3. I love that form of exhaustion. I think that it's really, really nice compared to traditional 5e exhaustion. And I love implementing that exhaustion and then working that in for downs so that every time you go down, you take a level of exhaustion. I think that is really, really good because it takes the yo-yoing, like the bouncing up and down, and actually gives you a detriment every time while not actually affecting the quickness at which you die, which I think a lot of like solutions to the down yo-yoing in 5e, their main way is like essentially making you die quicker. At least that's what I've seen from a lot of the homebrew. So I really like that of like using the 1 D&D exhaustion and then giving you a level of exhaustion every single time you go down. And with new exhaustion, with 1 D&D exhaustion, you don't die until you hit -10. That's when you die. All right, GG's, very, very cool. That was a good session. I liked once the plan was in execution, I think it was fun. That little not tent situation, but the barracks, I think is a great microcosm of how to design a little mini set, making more loops rather than straight lines. Thought that was beautiful. Got to see an assassin doing assassin things. Absolutely love it. Matt giving some maybe a bit too powerful of a bonus, but still players being creative and Matt giving nice bonuses to that creativity. So overall, it was a really dope session. I'm excited for the next one, and I will give my full takeaway at the beginning of next stream.
Is he telling the truth?
Inside check.
Interesting.
I think he is.
Would I recognize this creature he's describing?
Go ahead and make a nature check.
Also, I will say that I am not the type of DM to allow insight to be a lie detector, which I don't necessarily think Matt is right now, but that's just like a general thing for me of like, even if you succeed an insight check, you just get like cues about their body. And if they're a really good liar, if they roll like really good deception, or they're just, they have a naturally like high passive deception, you're still like, you're not going to get much. So I don't do like a straight contest of like deception to insight. I normally do like deception plus a few. So I don't know. And even then it's like, oh, he clearly looks nervous, or you noticed his eyes like flicking left and right as if he's nervous. Like things that you could physically see, and it's up to and then I will describe like your character associates these things with lying. But not like, oh yeah, he's definitely lying. Unless it's fucking obvious. Like unless like I just looking at him would know, but humans are not lie detectors, right? So I use insight as the like lie detector skill very sparingly.
I'm gonna go off into the city.
Should we we should all put on black armor.
We should get out of here. Keyleth,
you start hearing horns.
Yes. Okay, this is great. So this is exactly how I play armor when I do like narrate it and when it is like a factor. Is I normally say like armor is like generally hard to sell, especially if it's stolen and looted. But if you want to use it as disguises, fuck yes. Using armor as disguises is a well-worn trope, and it's a trope for a reason because it's so sick. It allows for like so many cool interactions. I love that. And if you've never like introduced a sequence like that where you're having this armor sets for your players, highly recommend. Oh, don't.
So Scanlan, both you guys both the gnomes get grabbed by Keyleth as.
And we're all on the carpet?
Yeah, carpet's away. But this guy's flying.
Ooh, okay. DM advice that people might not do, but I think leads to some really fun moments. So maybe fun for you guys to know and be aware of. When you have a hyper strong character like Grog, and basically anytime you have a race. Or any sort of feature that gives you additional carrying capacity or additional like weight that you can push, pull, carry, etc., etc. I always have that character that is really strong and has those features. I have them write down what those weights are. So like, what is their carrying capacity? Because there are rules for it in D&D that normally people kind of ignore because it sort of doesn't matter. But I always have them write it down, and then I make sure that everyone in the party writes down their natural weight and then their weight with all their equipment. So for non-strong people, it's 2 numbers, and for strong people, it's 2 numbers. And put them in like somewhere on your character sheet, and it is so. And the moment that you put it on their character sheet, they start thinking about it instantly. They start thinking about how they can use this character's really high carrying capacity and really high push-pull carry to do unique things, especially if they're small characters like Scanlan the gnome. They start thinking about like, okay, can I drop all my gear and then that we can do this fun thing? Heavily recommend, because it really is just 2 additional numbers for everyone, and they just have to exist on the sheet. You don't have to fucking roll anything. You don't have to have people learn a bunch of complicated rules. You just put them on the sheet, and they will instantly start thinking of creative solutions to do with those numbers.
We're actually one more against you, Keyleth. That one does hit. So Keyleth.
Okay, this is DM advice about something that I think Matt is not doing well here. I try to call him out when I see him, because most of the time I spend complimenting Matt. For something like this, where there are 20 to 30 javelins getting thrown at you, I would determine a DC using their stealth, and then have them roll some sort of dexterity save, or maybe even an animal handling check to navigate the carpet through this swarm of javelins. And then, depending on what they roll against the DC you set, and it can be like a gradient DC. I would recommend it, in fact. How far away they were from the DC determines how many of the javelins hit. So instead of having a fucking thing per javelin, because how many of them failed? 3, I think? So that's 9 rolls. Instead, you just have them, they already made the stealth rolls, you just have them make the one save or the one like animal handling check, and then that determines how many of them hit, and then you use average damage. Because especially for this sort of thing, like 20 to 30 Duragar, I talked last time about like abstracting threats into like what are essentially environmental hazards. Like they're essentially just flying through an environmental hazard, and I think that the solution that I'm pitching kind of inherently sort of goes into the fantasy of like steering the carpet through the javelins, whereas this, it feels like they're almost like weirdly accurate at that distance, right? If they're like pinprick choosing people based on stealth when they're like, so that's what I would recommend. When you start abstracting things out to this big, consider them an environmental hazard and treat them as such. Just come up with a DC and give them variable, essentially trap damage.
You take a total of 36 points of piercing damage, Grog.
And he still has more hit points than we do.
Yeah, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Barbarians.
Certainly.
Actually, yeah.
He is here, technically.
He is here. Scanlan's holding on tight.
This is why when I went on my rant about how Druid is the second most effective tank, because they gain HP rather than armor class, this is fucking why. Is because he gets hit with double crits and still has more health than everyone else. And health is the only thing that matters in D&D. That's why Blade Singers aren't crazy broken. You can gain all the AC in the world, but you still are made of paper mache. Don't get me wrong, AC is great, especially when paired with a high health pool, a la Fighter. But I think the most effective tanks in D&D are definitely health tanks, which brings Druid right on in there with how consistently they can get that large pool of temp HP.
Another volley comes to the guys who were under stealth.
Who's not stealth?
However, there's one attack less each because of the Duragar that you've taken out.
Yeah.
So, against Keyleth,
totally.
1 hits. You take 12 points of piercing damage.
And again, if I was this, I would just lower the DC because of Orion's actions there. But this is interesting. This is kind of showing Vex's general place and personality within the party of like, she is not a Grog. She is not a Vax. She's not the leader or the button pusher. She's more of like the heart or the soul, where it's like, oh my gosh, Trinket. And yes, she is, distinctly aligned with Trinket, but still. And it is interesting to watch those sorts of people interact of like, this is something that is incredibly important to her, but because of her inaction, she's essentially putting Trinket in danger. And I think that this is great fodder for PC drama later. I'm not necessarily saying that like I'm killing Trinket if I'm Matt. I'm not saying that at all. But I think that, if I'm Laura or if I'm Liam, I am bringing this back up later as like interesting interpersonal drama of Vex being like, we shouldn't have left Trinket. He could be dead. He could be dying. Like, you have no idea. You don't care about Trinket. You never have. Great fodder. When the leader or the button pusher makes a decision that is counter to the heart's sense of morality, that is a core piece of interpersonal drama within these big groups. So think about that when you're playing.
Okay. So
the trick about falling.
Plus 9 acrobatics.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
we're gonna roll some.
Still gonna knock me out.
Roll some fall damage here.
Okay, so this is big divisive time. Big. I mean, maybe not. I think that this conversation has kind of gone down in recent months. But big divisive time. Natural 1s and 20s are not auto successes or fails on skill checks. That is raw. That's not an opinion. In rules as written, natural 1s and 20s, the only thing that they do in D&D 5e, according to the rule book, is that they make you automatically miss a weapon attack, or they make you automatically hit a weapon attack. 1 and 20, that's it. And if you do get the crit, you either double the damage that the dice deal, or you roll twice as many dice. That's all that 1s and 20s do. Now, a lot of people obviously play with the homebrew rule that a 1 automatically makes you fail a skill check and a 20 automatically makes you succeed. I don't like that because a skill check succeeding or failing can be so much more impactful than a single weapon or spell attack. Oh, Richard, you got me again. You're so right. It is also death saves. A 20 is 2 successes and a failures, and a 1 is 2 failures. Shit. I was close to being definitively right, but you got me. That's a good one. That's a good actually. That's a great actually question. Anyways. So yeah, but a lot of people play with the homebrew rule of like 1s automatically skill check fail, 20s automatically skill check success.
I'm going to the left. I'll take up running to the left.
Okay.
Running.
Yes! Travis, push those buttons. Take action. You are in a... Okay. I obviously, we had a whole conversation about analysis paralysis when they were safe on the other side of a gorge. They are not safe right now. They are in the ruins of a camp with 2 potential places where enemies could be, and 1 place where enemies definitely are, and where the enemies are definitely currently breaking things down. You need to fucking go. Travis, my man. Fucking pushing that button, pushing the session forward. Chef's kiss, A+, go running down the tunnel.
Running.
Because it's not even like they're really arguing about it. They're just like, oh, I don't know. I don't really know what I want to do. It's kind of a hard choice. And Travis is like, just go. Just
Do you need to rest? I mean, I feel like we need to get our spells
Oh.
back, otherwise we're just gonna...
Oh, I had a thought. I had a theory. I had a brain blast. Kvarn, right? Kvarn, he's big dude, weird shit going on, big black horn, source of his power, right? Source of his power. Or its power. We don't know gender yet, which is part of my point. Kira of Vorn? I don't remember where she's from, but I remember it started with a V, and I've already made my theory connection between Kira and Kvarn. And I mentioned how, I thought that the eyes were an important thing with the Lady Kima of Vord. Thank you, John. Lady Kima. I made the connection that with the Gaze of Two Minds warlock invocation, how it seemed like with them narrating how the mind flayers are all connected and they all share experiences and visions and yada yada, that if she charmed the elder brain, then she could theoretically use Gaze of Two Minds to cast more spells through the elder brain and through all of the mind flayers that are just around. Right? So, if she is a fiend warlock and a pretty high level one, right? She would have to be high level to be an appropriate boss battle for a group of 7 I mean 8 on a good day, level 9s. So it has to be pretty high level. We're talking 16, 17 maybe. At that point, a lot of the times warlocks get more and more distinct marks of their patronage. What if Lady Kima has been a warlock this whole time, and she's been just faking all the Bahamut shit? She's been using the it's Mask of Many Faces, I think. Mask of Many Faces, another warlock invocation to disguise herself, make her look like a paladin. And she's using this vision quest as an excuse to go down there. Or potentially she actually was a paladin and she got transformed into this very high-level warlock at some point in the journey. And she got transformed into Kvarn. Also possible. Not quite sure. But that big long horn sounds like, all warlocks are supposed to have some sort of marker of their patronage. Like, whether it's like your eyes are weird, you got weird skin. That horn could be a very distinct warlock patron mark, which would make sense as to why it is theoretically called like the source of the power, because it's a mark of the patron, which the patron is the power. I'm thinking about it. Is this just a signal of me being a warlock main and knowing too much about warlocks? Maybe. Maybe I see warlocks in everything. But that's my theory about Kvarn at the moment. Or Kvarn's just a big bad and he's just regular. It's just, a regular scary demon. Also very possible.
Been here or something like that. So, in this vision,
okay, you know what's great about this? I've talked about in the past when in regards to Pike how I like visions as a narrative device within D&D, and specifically with Pike, I think it's a good kind of 2-for-1 deal on. It's a good way to lore dump. I've talked extensively during this watch through about lore dump NPCs. And like the right ways to do it, the wrong ways to do it. Matt's done both, in my opinion. And having a lore dump PC is very interesting, I think. Because one of the things that I talked a lot about with lore dump NPCs is that the NPCs have to have a reason to want to lore dump. Like, they have to want something from the players, whether that's companionship, information in trade. There's a lot of things that an NPC might want. With the PC, that's not a concern. The PC wants to share everything that they have, unless it's like, character shit, like if it's like backstory stuff. But like for this, I think it's a great strategy to, when Pike is gone, have her almost go into and maybe this is how he justifies it later, we'll see. But almost have her go into like a like catatonic, like holy state where she's like receiving these visions. And then whenever she comes back, Matt can then use her to deliver some foreshadowing, some lore, some hints, some clues. So she's an easy way to deliver vague clues. It makes the player, Ashley, feel cool and like a big and important plot point. And like she is like pushing story forward, and she gets a great opportunity to do some extensive RP on like what she tells and how she tells it. And you have now justified all the times that she's gone. And it's kind of a nice little cake of kind of combining mechanics. Justify thine lore dumps. Yeah. That's definitely my opinion. So yeah, I'm loving this. I'm loving it's like, oh, what did you do while you were gone? Oh, I went here and I learned this thing that, might just happen to relate to something we're about to encounter. And that's what's interesting for me about watching through Critical Role. Like I'm really liking it so far, but like this is why I want to do it on stream mystery science theater style, is so that, I'm almost kind of treating it as like a journal and also as kind of introspective analysis for me about like me thinking. Like I've posed several questions to you guys about like, oh, what would you do? Or like it's different for tables, or like as a DM, how would you run this? So all of this is great for me to be introspective about like, oh, how would I handle that in that situation? So I think it's making me a better DM, and you guys posing questions back to me, immediately being able to foil something, not foil in that sense, but being able to like come back at me with something that I may not have thought of when I gave my original statement. And then I can express from there. So yeah, I'm so glad that you guys like it and that you feel the same about it as I, because I also think that that's the interesting thing. So yeah, thanks.
And it kind of gives this horrible gurgling sound as it dies immediately on.
What? He's died?
I'm use my bonus.
Dies immediately! That's an assassin, baby! We don't even need half of this combat. We don't need the Illithid in that Derugar Illithid bullet fight. We don't need one of these ogres. I'm just making combat fucking easy.
Move. I can cast a spell.
You know what? It's kind of weird. It's sort of strange. I remember someone telling me really early on that everyone is absent at some point, and for most of them, you really feel the hole from when they're gone. And I'm gonna be straight up honest with you guys. When I saw that Sam was not here, that Scanlan wasn't in the ep, I was like, I don't know if I'll notice. I honestly don't know. I don't know if I'll care. I'm feeling the absence a little bit. Sam was, out of the 7, he was probably not my top half, but I miss him. I miss old Scanlan. He was very horny, which always threw me off. But I miss something about the little guy. Well, maybe there's like a mini boss before Kvarn. That's interesting. Oh, we'll see. My first time around with C1, I started with the 3rd arc, popular choice. I went back and watched the start later, and it was easier to handle after already getting attached. That's fair. I mean, and that's, I can honestly say if I'd been trying to start from the beginning, I may not have made it this far, or I might be falling out right about now, but having you guys... and like, because half of this for me is watching the show, and half of this is being able to like express my DM opinions and just talking about D&D with people who are also very into D&D. It's only half a slog for me, which I think helps a lot. They are somehow confusing the unarmored defense calculation with actual armor and now giving him a +2 from wearing armor, even though in this circular logic chain, I mean, I'm guessing he probably has like a +3 to dex and like a +3 to con, which is how he got to 18, right? Because I think unarmored defense is 12 plus dex plus con, so something in that realm. And so now he probably actually has a 17 because it's 12 plus dex plus 2, and his dex is +3, I'm guessing. This is all sorts of fucked up. Orion says, hey, as Tiberius, I would like to cast Feather Falling on a bunch of people. Does that lighten the load on the carpet and effectively increase the carpet's carrying capacity? Because that takes us from falling 500 feet around to falling 60 feet around. But we've already established that things fall at the same pace regardless of how much they weigh. So what are the mechanics of feather falling? Like, what does it actually do? How would you rule that as a DM? That's my prompt of the day. Hell, maybe I'll put that out on community tab poll. How would you rule that interaction of how does feather falling affect the carrying capacity of a magic flying carpet?
Way down to the bottom.
Mercer dance, Clarota dance. What? All right, yeah, let's go out on a high note. I gotta see this. Critical Role applause. Matt Mercer dance, Clarota dance. They did Dude, Richard, don't even talk to me about that 24 GP. You're right. They got 24 GP, guys. Totally worth it. Was that not the previous ep when the Q&A and might have been. I haven't watched the Q&A yet. I think I'm actually going to watch the Q&A potentially next stream as a break between the 5 episode segments. All right, dance Clarota dance. All right. Oh, and we're going to make him look even smoother with an up on the playback speed. All right. Dance, Clarota, dance. That's an hour and a half. Yeah, I don't have that. I really love these background dancers. Hell yeah. A wizard gets on the carpet, casts floating disc. People get on the disc. The wizard rides the carpet forward, and the disc follows. John? Man, I'll just ask for John's question of the stream. Because that's a better one of like, does that work? I think it does. I think floating disc specifically works there. Although, I think it sinks if it's over a chasm that's a certain height. I don't know. I'd have to look into it. 24 GP, that's almost a quarter of a spyglass. Yeah, and they're on a quest for 25 grand, Nico. 25 GP is table scraps. They do not need 24 GP. I checked, the dancing is different than the Q&A. I see. Wait, I got it. I'm dancing too. I'm ready. I'm dancing too fast. Oh, Matt Marisha burners. I see. I love imagining Matt at Burning Man hitting the dance Clarota dance. I am a TF2 taunt. I was given sentience. Oh, Bug wants to dance. You can't see it, but Bug is trying to dance as well. Good times. Good times. Good end of stream. We end the stream standing on our own 2 feet after having gone absolutely nowhere.